Morning.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
How's everybody doing?
Fairly good.
Good. Hi, Edith. I'm Kristen. Oh, and let me unmute you. There we go. No.
I'm
There.
turning the ringer off on my phone.
Okay. How are you, Marjorie?
I'm doing pretty well. People keep telling me I'm doing very well. So that's not me, but
You look wonderful.
yeah. Well, I have a brand new hip.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Brand new as of not even a week ago.
No, yeah, 4 days ago.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I can walk up and down my stairs and walk around the house.
Do you have much pain, Marjorie?
Hardly any.
And do you want to enable me to screen share?
Ah, yes. Let me do that.
Ah, good.
Yeah. Hang on. And we're recording. Let's see. So, Edith, I haven't figured it out since they updated this thing.
If you make me a co-host, that should do it.
Right. You see where it
Go
is?
under participants.
Under participants, okay. And then click you. And okay, under participants and click more.
Yes.
Okay. No, that one's not doing it. I know that there's a way to do this. There. Make. Okay. So I'm just going to make you the host. It won't let me do co-host, but I'll just make you the host, okay?
Okay.
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 All right. We've got 14 so far, so that's good. And it's right at noon. So we had, I'm gonna go check the responses again. We had 36 when I checked right at 11:30.
I might ought to go and be in the other room. It's more comfortable.
Nope, that looks like it. Okay. Right.
Pam Houston.
Yes. Hi, Edith.
I hear somebody's birds chirping.
I think it's Pam's.
They build their nests very close to our house.
It's beautiful. So, and Edith had requested, if at all possible, for everyone to have their video actually on for our discussion and her presentation discussion this afternoon.
I just like seeing people.
It's nice to see people's
It
faces.
is nice.
It is. And Edith, do you want to mute everybody while we're while you're talking
Sure.
until you actually.
You just tell me, Kristen, when you want me to start intro and when we want to start, and then I'll.
Okay. Well, I think we've got 17 now, and it's a couple minutes after. I think you can go ahead and start introductions, Denise. That'd be great.
Great. Hi, welcome everybody to our hot topic for June. So thrilled to have Edith Guffey with us today. Thank you so much for your time, Edith. Edith worked for the United Church of Christ for almost 30 years. She currently serves as the regional conference minister for the Kansas-Oklahoma Conference. And in this role, she provides support for 60 churches in the 2 states. Over the years, she's been a voice in the United Church of Christ across the country, encouraging congregations and people of faith to engage in the difficult work of sacred conversations on race. In 2015, following the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, with Edith's leadership, the Kansas-Oklahoma Conference committed itself to a 3-year initiative on racial justice. It is that commitment that led to the work on white privilege that Plymouth Church here in Lawrence in particular is engaged deeply in. Edith was an original member of the Douglas County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and completed her term last January. She continues to serve on the working group focused on racial disparities in the jail population. So we're very happy to have you here today, Edith. Thank you again. And she will be speaking on In the Streets from 1968 to 2020. Will this time be different?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. It seems like light years ago when Tamara Cash first asked me about this possibility. I think it was just in January, but the world has literally changed since then, as evidenced in how we gather now. At that time, my hot topic was going to be something that seems pretty simple now. And it was, the title was Moving from Colorblind to Color Brave. I thought that was a pretty intriguing title, but it doesn't seem to fit today. But I realized that the notion of being colorblind has still played a role in getting us where we are today as a country. Because, you know, we've never really learned how to talk about race in this country. And what I see happening in the streets of our country, I wonder really if this time will be different. And you might wonder, different than what? And it would be a mistake to assume that we have a common experience. So let me tell you about mine and we'll go from there. Some of you may remember, and as I look, maybe all of us remember the 60s. Dating back, some of you may remember the protests of the 60s that date back to maybe 1965 in Watts and then in 67 in Detroit and Newark. It was April of 1968. I was 15, almost 15 years old, and I lived in Kansas City, Missouri. And that's when Dr. Martin Luther King was killed. And it seemed as if the streets of Kansas City had exploded. It wasn't just Kansas City. Civil unrest was happening all across the country. Some records indicate that it was in as many as 110 cities that experienced some degree of protest in the summer of 1968. The cities of Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore endured the most destruction. While some wanted to blame this outpouring of anger solely on the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, the accompanying rage and racial tension had been building for years. By the time it was all over in Kansas City, the father of one of my friends had been killed, and the flourishing African-American area that surrounded Central High School, where I had attended, was completely destroyed. It's still a vast wasteland. It was a summer that seemed to never end. And I remember many people, adults, saying that something simply had to change. And that is part of who I am today. That is the history that I carry, that I, like many of you, think about maybe as you watch TV, as I look at my Facebook feed and Instagram. And that's what I think about as I hear the commentators say, this time will be different. This feels different. And I say, really? Will it be different? I heard that something had to change back in 1968. And here we are. What happened? I hope you're asking yourselves those same questions. You know, I wish I could give you a simple analysis about what happened, but here is a very simplistic picture of what I think happened. You know, I love flowers, but I am not a gardener. The house I grew up in had what I now know and would call lovely peonies. But as a child, I really didn't like them in the yard. So once when I had to mow the yard, I mowed them down. But they kept coming back. I didn't know, no one taught me about annuals. I didn't know that I had to dig deep and remove the entire plant if I was really going to get rid of those peonies for good. Systemic racism is like that. What we did in 1968 was something, but it wasn't good enough. Because as a country, we failed to address the systemic racism that is deeply rooted in our country and institutions. Everything, every institution in our country is built and infected with the virus of racism. Right now, the focus is on the police, as it should be, but systemic racism infects every single part of our society. There is no escaping it. Remember, the very land we live on was stolen from the Native Americans who were here and owned this land. And then white people brought Africans to this country as slaves. Many owned us as property and then declared that the white race was superior in every way. Legally declared that Black people were only 3/5 of a person, fought a war to keep the institution of slavery alive, and the list of atrocities goes on and on. How could this part of the history of our country have no enduring impact? Poisonous water that never really goes away until some has never done that work, and the systemic racism and the fruits thereof continues. Right now, if we focus only on the police, we will miss the bigger picture. We have to think about the environment, the culture that shapes a police officer that kneels on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. How does he come to have such low regard for him, for a human being, as he cries out for his mother and says he can't breathe? Does he think he won't be held accountable? Does he think he is above the law? In this day of cell phones, he knows he's being recorded, and yet he still does it. The answer to these questions is to look at the history, the pattern of cases that have happened before. What has this policeman learned from this country? How many Black men have been killed by police and how many have been held accountable? This is the bigger concern that the country must grapple with. It is this callous disregard and value for the lives of Black people that has its roots in slavery and continues to manifest itself in our institutions today. Will this time be different? Did we simply not know what was actually at the root of the protests that we saw in 1968? You know, there is this saying that we can learn from history or we are doomed to repeat it. So if this time is really going to be different, we might look at what happened after the turbulent 60s. President Lyndon Johnson created the Kerner Commission to identify what actually caused the uprisings in Detroit and Newark in 1967. The Kerner Commission report came out in March 1967, right before Martin Luther King was assassinated. And this is what they said. Oops, let me find that. What caused the riots? The Kerner Commission said this.
Edith?
Are you seeing this?
No, we're not. We're just seeing like a
Okay.
blank PowerPoint.
You are screen sharing, but you are not screen sharing. Huh. Are you seeing it now?
No.
Huh. Okay.
I think we're,
Stop share. Okay, share screen. You know, I hate this.
there it is.
You are seeing it now.
Yeah, it all converged to propel violent upheaval.
Okay. Now you're seeing it.
Yes.
Okay, what caused the riots in the cities? The Kerner Commission said this: bad policing practices, a flawed justice system, unscrupulous consumer credit practices, poor or inadequate housing, high unemployment, voter suppression, and other culturally embedded forms of racial discrimination. This was 1968, by the way. All converged to propel violent upheaval on the streets of African-American neighborhoods in American cities, North and South, East and West, and as Black unrest arose, inadequately trained police officers and National Guard troops entered affected neighborhoods, often worsening the violence. The presidentially appointed panel reports, white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it. The nation, the Kerner Commissioner warned, was so divided that the United States was poised to fracture into two radically unequal societies, one Black, one white. The Kerner Commission's 1968 report concluded the country is moving toward two societies, one Black, one white, separate and unequal. Newsweek published a special edition that said, instead of whispering in its readers' ears, Newsweek was screaming in their faces. The Kerner Commission report didn't stop with just these indictments of the current realities. It made sweeping recommendations that addressed areas of housing, job creation, unemployment and underemployment, education, and policing. The report spoke to the distrust that was in communities and resulted in Negroes seeing and experiencing two systems of justice, one for whites and another for Blacks. It called for massive investment and redirection of federal spending from the Vietnam War to social programs. And you might imagine it was not popular. It was a political nightmare for Lyndon Johnson. Needless to say, he did not support the recommendations of his own commission. Given that the report laid the responsibility squarely on the shoulders of white America, it was soundly rejected. The administration did not shift resources for social reform, and Congress would not agree to tax increases. The recommendations of the Kerner report that may have made some inroads on the systemic issues that plague our country went unheeded in 1968. Nixon ran on a platform of law and order, and the sweeping recommendations that were in the Kerner report were never fully embraced and implemented. The rest is history. So now we know the names. Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Eric Gardner, Terrence Crutcher, Philandro Castile, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and now Rayshard Brooks, and likely many more. So yes, it is the killing of Black people by police that have propelled thousands into the streets for days and nights of protests in the middle of a global pandemic. But like in 1968, what we see in our streets is about something bigger. It's the bigger picture that creates the environment of policing that allows police to see African-American men as threats, that allows the Amy Coopers of the world to know that by simply saying there is an African-American man in the park is a signal that she is in danger. That is the systemic racism that contributes to the incarceration rate of African-American men in our country, here in Douglas County even. It is an ugly picture. The 2020 Economic Report on the State of Black America reports the following. Despite significant economic progress over the past decades, Black Americans experience far worse economic conditions than whites for the population as a whole. Historically, the unemployment rate for Black Americans has been approximately twice the rate for whites. The typical Black household earns a fraction of white households, just 59 cents for every dollar. Black Americans are over twice as likely to live in poverty as white Americans. Black children are 3 times as likely to live in poverty as white children. The median wealth of Black families, $17,000, is less than 1/10 that of white families. The wealth gap between Black and white households increases with education. Much less than half, 42% of Black families own their homes, compared with almost 3/4, 73% of white families. I know that sometimes in Kansas, we think we're different or not as bad, so let's look at how we fare here. The African-American population in Kansas is 5.9%, yet the unemployment rate of African-Americans is 8% compared to 3.2% of whites. Median household income of African-Americans is $35,412 compared to $61,447 for whites. The poverty rate among African Americans is 25.3% compared to 9.5% for whites. And of course, we often think we're different here in Lawrence than the rest of Kansas. The 2018 Health Equity Report published by the Douglas County Health Department indicates the Black population in Douglas County is more likely than the white population to have an income lower than the county average. We're more likely to struggle financially and to lose years of potential life to cardiovascular disease. Black infants are more likely to be born at a low birth weight, a more than twofold difference than other population groups. A Douglas County resident must earn $16.25 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Lawrence, which is $33,800 a year. A Black population with a median income of $31,042 is below this benchmark. You know, I could keep quoting numbers and statistics, but the point is that in every single indicator, at every single level, national, state, county, local, the racial disparities are clear and persistent. Numbers do not lie. And one looks at them and you have to ask, what explanation is there for such consistent disparities across the country in every single area of measurement for one racial group? I won't deny that there are disparities for other persons of color as well, but that only adds fuel to the fire. In this country, generally speaking, persons of color fare far worse than white Americans. Could it possibly be that Black and brown people are just not as smart as white people or just don't work as hard as white people? Really? We're way beyond that, aren't we? Or might we really have to face that years of systemic inequities are revealing themselves in these numbers? This is the outcome of failure to address systemic racism and white supremacy. Before 1968, again in the Kerner Commission report, and in countless opportunities since then. So here we are today, June 18th, one day before Juneteenth, the annual holiday that commemorates the end of slavery, 1865. It has been 155 years ago this year. We are at a crucial point in our country. And yes, it does feel a little bit like 1968. But I was 15 years old then. I'm slightly older now and hopefully a little wiser. Will this time be different? That is an open question. I suspect there were people of goodwill who wanted change then. There were certainly recommendations in the Kerner report. Those recommendations didn't go forward because there was not the political will of white people to own their role and demand systemic changes, because to do so meant giving up power, acknowledging white privilege and the ways the system in this country is designed to benefit white people and disempower people of color. I say that without bitterness or anger, but as a statement of reality. Some note a new generation of young people, young white people who are joining Black and brown people demanding justice, calling for a more just world, who want to dig deeper and dismantle the centuries of oppression that have created the systems that literally take the breath away of Black and brown people. So will this time be different? You know, I have actually changed my mind about this even this morning. I have changed from asking if this time will be different to saying this time must be different. because I really worry about our country if we don't see radical changes this time. I believe that the patience of young people is growing thin. I find my patience is sometimes thin. They are demanding change. They have seen too much. We no longer live isolated lives. They see what is happening in the moment. They have seen too much, and as we can see, they are willing to march in the very midst of a global pandemic, risking their very lives to demand change. We owe them, and we owe ourselves, a better future. I have 2 adult children, ages 32 and 35. Every time there is a young African-American man killed, I call my children. Every single time. They have grown to expect my call. I don't want that for their children. We have to change. We owe them and ourselves a different world. And honestly, that is really more up to you than it is up to me. You who are white need to do the work to dig deep, to go beyond being afraid to talk about race, to confronting racist actions and systems, and demanding changes in racist policies and institutions, and exploring your own possibly unintended racist behavior. If you are uncomfortable with the use of the word white supremacy, ask why and engage in the hard work to understand the roots of systemic racism in our country and how it has impacted and shaped you. This is not easy work, and it is not once and done. It is a continuous journey, not a sprint. If you are to be effective and if there is to be long-lasting change, you must commit yourself to the long haul, long after the headlines fade, and you must commit yourself to possibly being unpopular in your family or with your Facebook friends, as this work must become part of your political, family, faith, and personal life, as the reality of race and systemic racism is everywhere. And silence is indeed violence. Silence is complicity. In the streets, 1968 to 2020. Will this time be different? It must be different. It has to be different. But in the end, it really, really is up to you. That's all I got, folks.
Thank you so much.
Let's talk.
Edith, would you prefer that they submit questions to chat or just jump in?
Just raise your hand. There are enough of us. There are few enough of us that I can manage that.
Okay, very good.
Edith, my video does not work. This is Suzanne Ellis, so I can't raise my hand. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It absolutely breaks my heart that you have to call your sons every time. My husband and I have an African-American daughter, and we have to do the same thing. We're part of I'm sorry to cry, but it just hurts me that we have to live in this kind of world. I do have 3 biological boys who are white. Because their sister is Black, they really understand racism, and they experienced it when they were kids, and they would go someplace, the 3 of them would go places and people would holler out all kinds of stuff at them. So they understand it, but most of us who are white do not understand at all. We don't see what it's like when you go into a store and they won't take your credit card, or they take a long time processing it. They have to see if your $20 bill is a real $20 bill, more so if you're Black than if you're white. I am angry. I am seeing some change. I am so excited about these kids that are getting active, that are 18 to 35 years old, and that are out in the streets. Unfortunately, I couldn't be out in the street, or else I would have been out there screaming from the top of my head. I hope that everybody on this call realizes that if we're white, we don't have a clue. And with regards to healthcare for Blacks, my daughter, when she has a 3-year-old now, she's married to a Kickapoo native. When she was in labor, they did not do an episiotomy. So when that baby was born, she was torn unbelievable. Well, I think episiotomies have been around for a heck of a long time. And that wouldn't have happened to me. That didn't happen to me when I delivered my 3 boys. So I'm sorry to be emotional. I'm not sorry to be emotional. We all need to be emotional. We all need to be as emotional as when we saw George Floyd lying there with that policeman, with the expression on that policeman's face. That's what we see in all white Americans, because they can't believe it. They don't see what Black Americans are going through, and people of color and Kickapoo natives. I mean, it's just disgusting. I applaud everything that you said. I'm 100% behind you. And I am so upset that you have to call your sons, just like we have to call our daughter to see if they're okay.
We all do. I mean, I'm not the only person. We all call our children every time we see that. The question is, we've been doing it for years. Lois?
I have a question because my husband and I have been thinking quite a bit about what might be different this time from the 60s, and because we do remember the 60s. And I'm wondering if you personally see a greater reaction from white folks this time than you did last time. More white people speaking out instead of, in addition to the youth. Do you see it as something different, where we might have a chance to actually have a more sustained conversation than in the 60s?
Well, I was 15.
Yeah, that's true. I was older than that.
I was 15, and you don't, what you could see then is different from what you can see now. Our world is bigger now because of what we can see on social media. Mm-hmm. My world was different. I lived in the hood. And mm-hmm. So my whole world was different. So others may have to speak about that. I had a different worldview at that time. And so I really can't address that. I just don't know. I didn't have the same kind of access mm-hmm. that I have now.
Well, I guess I'm thinking that, I guess I'm being more hopeful now because of things like, the new Jim Crow is back on the top top 10 selling list of books just recently, and that's, you know, how many years old is that book? More and more people are looking for things to read, engaged in conversations, and I think I was about 19 then. I'll see if I can do my math, but I just did not notice the same kind of conversation going on with any of the white people around me in the 60s that I'm seeing now.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask a question. What got your attention? I mean, what got the attention this time? I mean, it was the new Jim Crow's been out there.
Mm-hmm.
We've had all of these black men shot and all these black men killed. We've had uprisings every time. What this time made the difference? It was sort of like, do we have to have 10 days before people listen? What was it this time?
You know, my own opinion is that, first of all, people were all stressed out because of the pandemic. So that put people in a different mindset. But to me, in people I've talked with, it was the look on that officer's face, knowing that he was being videoed and realizing that it didn't really matter because he didn't care. And I've talked to other people who it wasn't the first time I've been concerned, but it did wake up some other people because it was so in your face that I don't care if you're videotaping me, I'm in the process of murdering this man, and it's okay because I'm going to get away with it. And I think that it was just finally too much. And also right before it, you know, you're out jogging and a couple of three crazy men chase you down and then kill you. You know, the videos that we're getting, and also I think the realization that if that video had not been accidentally leaked, the world would not have known that 3 white jerks gunned down an innocent black man who was simply out for a jog. And so I think that the white America is starting to wake up to the fact that this is something that goes on all the time, and it's just that we are now having the opportunity, that's a strange word, but it's because it's being videotaped, people are now finally believing what Black America has been saying for centuries. And it's just in your face, you cannot ignore it.
Mm-hmm. Sonia, your hand is up.
Edith, thanks for your talk today. I really appreciate your historical perspective. I teach history, and one thing my students learned when we spun off the Black Death this year and looked at other pandemics is that they often create conditions for social unrest and change. And there was, to the question you asked, there was a story on NPR featuring the man who has the show Code Switch, who had a couple really insightful comments about that. One of them has to do with the pandemic, or one of the causes why things seem to be different now. The other one was the widespread lack of trust in the people who are in authority. In other words, the lack of leadership of the Trump administration, widespread dissatisfaction, anger, resentment about the lack of leadership. So I think, you know, only time will tell whether, in fact, this is a sea change or a disruption, or whether, you know, the country, as it has so many times in the past, will ignore the same kinds of reports that have been coming out for hundreds of years, like the report you discussed today, and yet nothing changes. My question actually had to do a lot more at the local level. I'm seeing people in the Black Lives Matter community and friends posting about Rontaris Washington Jr. and asking for contributions to a GoFundMe fund for his mother to support the legal fees to get him out of, I think his bail is set at something like $750,000, and you know, he's been in jail since 2015. And I just wondered if you had any insight about that. I'm not that deeply familiar. I wasn't following it super closely, so I wondered if you knew about that situation and had some thoughts about it.
I know Tamara is on the phone. Tamara probably knows more about this than I do. Tamara?
She still has her mute on.
I asked her to unmute.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I've not followed that. You know, I'm not. I only came back here in 2013, and it was mentioned in our meeting yesterday that Jolene was in, and I know that they were in the city commission yesterday, the other night, and protesting. But I can't say that I know many details at all. I know we have I know that the bail system, the bond system is horrible everywhere. But I can't say that I know many specifics about the case.
Okay, Edith, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Little technical difficulty here. So the question was about Rontarius, Washington.
Yes.
Specifically, what are you asking?
Hey Tamara, I was just asking if anyone knows anything about the situation other than what I've read, you know, in the newspaper coverage from February, I guess, when there was a another delay so that more testing could be done. I've seen calls for funding to presumably get him out of jail to pay the bail, and I just wondered if anybody had any thoughts or insights about that situation.
Well, I have personal thoughts in that, as you said, this young man has been incarcerated for the last 5 years or so. And that's about 1/4 or 1/5 of his life. And there was one trial, which I think resulted in a hung jury. And so now they're wanting to try him again. What I have read leads me to believe that there are still questions. And so you don't convict someone if there's reasonable doubt. I mean, I'm no attorney, but you know, we've all seen enough and read enough to know that that's should be the case. So I personally don't know if the young man has some guilt, if he acted alone, if he didn't act at all, if he acted in concert with the estranged husband. So, you know, doubt. And so my thinking is let him out of here. Let him go back with his mother until a new trial is scheduled, if that's what they feel like they need to do. But this is cruel and unusual punishment, and it just reflects quite often what happens with African-American individuals in the judicial system. And just to be totally transparent, Edith and I are on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, or committees from that council. And we are working hard to get the systems changed. And it's a very convoluted system, as Edith mentioned, that, you know, it goes all the way from mothers with poor prenatal health care to low weight birth weight, children being born with poorly developed brains who go to kindergarten or preschool and aren't ready. And they get angrier and angrier, and then they end up in the criminal justice system. I mean, talk about a domino effect. And Edith is kind enough to say that she's saying things not with anger. Well, I can't say the same thing. And any of you who know me have heard me talk about things for years. I'm just tired. I guess a favorite saying of mine is when I think about interactions with white people, I don't hate you, but I'm tired of you. I'm tired of dragging you along year after year, month after month, trying to get you to see the same things. It's just way past time for you to take responsibility. So, enough said. That's it.
Tell us how you really feel, Tamara.
Well, you don't have enough time.
Other questions? Yes, Grace.
I live in Shawnee County. I'm in the Topeka League, and I wanted to join you today. I'm supposed to be the state board liaison to Lawrence, and COVID just wiped out all my opportunities to visit you. And today is the first time, and I'm so impressed with this presentation. I wonder if you would be willing to share that slide you had of the recommendations of the Kerner Commission. I think it'd make a great letter to the editor to point out to the public how little progress we've made on this. I think there were 5 or 6 points to that were really excellent.
Sure, it was kind of funny. It did sort of seem like this could be 2020, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also was going to respond to, you know, what made the George Floyd situation different. I just thought there was so much clarity. Sometimes in some of the other cases, you can make excuses or, you know, say, did I really see that right? Or did the police see that right? Or were they, you know, did they really have a justification? This was so clear, and it went on so long.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, so it went on for so long that you had to look away.
Yeah.
You could hardly stand it.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe that was, yeah. And then when I got on Facebook, that long list of hashtag white privilege and hashtag I can sit in my car, I can walk my pet in Central Park, I can do this, I can do that, and it just went on forever. I thought that was very effective too.
Yeah, let me rephrase that. I said it was kind of funny that was 1968. There really is nothing funny about it. There really is nothing funny about it. It is shameful that we have not made more progress in this country. And I don't want to be flippant about it. I think sometimes I deflect that because that's the way that I cope. I've lived all of my life in the white world. Someone said to me at one point, I wonder what would happen if you got in touch with your rage, and that's probably not something that would be a pretty sight. There's nothing.
That would be me, Edith.
Was that you?
Just tell them you change your name to Tamara.
Yeah. So, other questions? Marcy.
Thank you so much. So I really appreciate this. There's a good story in a recent New Yorker about the report and what had happened. Do you have a chance to see that, or did you?
I have not seen that.
So I'm going to send you a copy. But the other thing I wondered, our book club is talking about what books we should be reading these next couple of months, because we need to be educating ourselves. So I don't want to put everything on you. If you have ideas what we should read, that'd be great. But if other people have read some books that have really hit home in terms of understanding this, I would appreciate hearing those.
One thing that, you know, I would suggest to all of you, you can read, and yes, you do need to educate yourself, but you also need to get to know people in person, in the flesh. And that can help you understand people who are different than you, and stop being afraid to just interact with people or touch people, or, you know, it's just ridiculous. We're still at this point. 400 years later. So there's a lot that can be done in addition to reading and studying.
So Tamara, I'm going to say that my husband and I are very lucky to have worked with an African American, help him when the city was condemning his house and getting rid of it. We were able to buy it from him, completely renovate it so the city wasn't concerned, and we're renting it back to him. And I have seen over probably the 40 years I've known him, those issues. So I'm not immune to this. And it's not that I don't have people that I'm working with. I see the same thing in terms of the two state senators who are African American, Senator Faustido and Senator Haley, that I work with. So yes, we want to know people. I've done some of that. I'm sorry I asked this question if it offends you.
You know, this is one of the problems, I think. We live such racially segregated lives. And the more racially isolated we are, the less we know. And when I moved away from Lawrence, I actually said I'd never come back, because it was only when I moved away that I realized that my children had no role models, because there were no people of color in leadership in Lawrence. And so it was only when I moved to Cleveland that I said, oh my gosh, they had no role models in Lawrence, Kansas. There was no one in the city commission, the county commission. They didn't have any African American teachers here at the time. And I said I would never come back here. I certainly wouldn't come back until they were out of the house. So now I'm back in Lawrence. I never intended to be. And so it makes me think what racially isolated lives are unhealthy for all of us.
I think
and part of that is because of economics.
Edith,
economics. Go ahead.
Could I interject something? That I think that many people believe that if they interact with somebody when they're in need or in trouble, or if they engage in giving to charity, that's having a relationship with somebody who's of another ethnic group. But what I'm talking about is getting to know somebody eyeball to eyeball on a regular basis, and that person is equal to you. Not necessarily equal in income, but just an equal human being. That's the kind of interaction I'm talking about.
And again, I'm very pleased that until the public library closed, Joe was meeting really once a week with Leon and working with him. So the other concern I really had at the city commission meeting Tuesday night, because I was the individual who was speaking about the allocations to the neighborhood associations when other individuals, brought up their concerns and interrupted that. The city commission probably did a pretty good job of listening to the protesters, but the individual who was making requests for the neighborhood association, I think the president of Brook Creek, an African American, ended up getting pretty much ignored. And that I felt was really telling, because when people come down and participate and then you don't respond to their comments as much as you are responding to the comments of others, you're really leaving them out.
It's so insidious. I read the health equity report And even when, for the people who are really, really trying hard, they refer to people of color as non-white. And I was like, these are the people who are really working hard, but they refer to a group of people as non-white, as sort of like in comparison to white people, they group us as non-white. You know, that, I'm sure it was out of their consciousness. And that's an example of how deep it goes. They had no idea that that was, or at least to me, it was like, really? In the health equity report, you're going to use the word non-white. So, but that's just how deep and how out of consciousness it is. So, I believe we are almost out of time.
What's a good way to make that reference? We don't want to say other.
I would say people of color.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would do. So. I really want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the invitation and for the conversation. I hope you will be brave and courageous in engaging in this conversation. I hope you will be relentless in doing this work because it is a journey, not a sprint. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Edith.
Thank you, Edith.
Time today, and I wanted to tell everyone, I hope you can join us next month. Matt Cravens will be talking about racial disparities in sentencing and criminal justice next month. So that will be again third Thursday at noon via Zoom. So be looking for those invites for signups and then the links. So thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
I would like to thank you too.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Denise.
Okay.
Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you, Edith.
Bye all.
You're welcome.